Now, today is the 19th conference that we have of this nature. And the reality is that I have been having the privilege of chairing this conference for all these 19 years, since the age of 35. So you can work out the maths about my current age. And it's been a landmark every year to discuss the developments and the trends for every year, to talk about the evolution of management practices, the evolution of the human factor, the evolution of how we are leading our businesses. And every year, for those of you who have been loyal participants for every single year, you know that I start my introduction with playing a little bit with a number. We've celebrated the 10 years, the 15 years, the 16 years. So this year, it was actually an easy way to play with a number because we've been experiencing this massive experience of COVID around us. And there's so much to reflect upon and so much to talk about. We have talked about a lot of themes that we had was that we have to be ready that the world is not going to go back to a stable, normal world. In fact, we're saying we need to brace ourselves for a world of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Well, words that this year, I think, ring a very interesting dimension. In fact, we can even say that we're experiencing VUCA on steroids this year. But everything we've talked about over the years is coming to a reality. We've talked about the need for digital transformation. It's a theme that was with us for the last few years. But we also made the point before in conferences like this that we should not only focus on automation, not only focus on tools, not only focus on making our businesses ready on the digital agenda that is around the technology enhancement, but to consider the evolution as a business transformation and look at all the dimensions of our business, including, of course, the human factor. And we experienced effectively a stress test about the readiness of our technology and our tools, the readiness of our people to manage, our agility, even the readiness of our human capital policies. And we did a lot of things right, and we discovered a lot of weaknesses. And it's fair to say from the beginning that different businesses have been impacted in a different way. Different industries have been impacted in a different way. Some have actually had a positive outcome out of this, but most of the businesses, of course, and most of the industries have had a negative to a very negative impact. And a lot of letters of the alphabet have been used to describe the economic impact and the likely economic recovery, letters like a V recovery or a U or an L or a W. But I think, an interesting letter is the letter K that demonstrates that, in some industries, it's actually an upward move, and in some industries, it's a downward move. So taking into account the fact that there are different conditions and different circumstances for each organization, we're going to move into consider, what does this mean for all of us? And to make things even more complex, we see that despite the underlying economic crisis beyond the health crisis that we're experiencing, and despite the big unemployment that we have, or the threat to unemployment, we have the stock markets actually being out of tune with the economic reality, with interesting factors about the available liquidity that exists in the economy and the way that liquidity can be used in the recovery. But coming back to the theme of our workshop, which is the future of work, we have been really talking about how to imagine the way we work, how to imagine a world, a digital world where there will be more interaction between humans and machines. We've talked about the trends, we've talked about the readiness that we needed to have. And we have experienced it in a massive way. I mean, it's fair to say that in the last 6, 7, 8 months, we've all been through a massive forced social experiment of really experiencing working fully virtually and realizing what's working well, the strengths, the benefits of it, but also experiencing and realizing the weaknesses and the difficulties that come with it as well. But it's fair to say that with this acceleration forward, with this forced experimentation, we actually had to deal with the realities of this virtual world, which is upon us. And in fact, we may be talking about the future of work, but that future is here. We're living it. So it's no longer a theoretical, we need to do something at some point in time in the future. I think all of us are dealing with these day-to-day realities on how to really push forward. Now, there's an interesting survey that came out a couple of months ago, over the summer. PwC asked a number of global CEOs about their views on what would be an enduring trend beyond the pandemic of what we're experiencing today. So what do they expect? And global CEOs actually, at the big majority, are saying that they expect the remote collaboration to be an enduring trend. Remote collaboration, not just physical collaboration, which really talks about the need to continue investing in the right tools to facilitate the remote collaboration. But beyond the tools, it really means that we need to consider the culture and the behaviors and the mindset that should also be built around these tools to enable remote collaboration to really be optimized. Also, they're talking about automation, so digitizing the workspace. They're talking about low-density workplace. So we expect that we will continue to have physical safety concerns, and that will have an implication on real estate, that will have an implication on redesigning the workplaces per se. And of course, the gig economy will continue to be with us, which is about the mix of our employees, the composition of our workplace, and again, issues about how do we engage different people in different work profiles. So navigating through the crisis, we had to go through all the steps to attend to the safety issues, to the immediate crisis issues that we had in a mobilization phase. We are pretty much in a more stabilizing stage of that crisis management. We are trying to deal with the economic crisis. And we have been talking about the need to strategize, the need to, at the same time, think about the future and prepare for this new abnormal that we have in front of us. And it feels, in many ways, that like we're kind of moving in a pendulum, and sometimes the pendulum is shifting too far. We have been working fully physically, for example. We went massively in a remote for all the people that could work remote. Not all of the people in all the industries could, but we went remote. Then we had the opportunity in Cyprus to go back to the office to a great degree, back to physical. Now we are forced by the second wave to consider perhaps again going fully remote. But in many ways, we have been working in a hybrid environment. And clearly, no environment by itself is the optimized, perfect environment. The physical is familiar. We know how to work. Going into remote, we had to learn and adapt to new skills and new tools and new ways of working. Going back to physical was sometimes felt to be the way to move forward because it was familiar and people knew how to operate, whereas the virtual was still having teething issues and having problems. Hybrid, which means accommodating people who are both physical and virtually at the same time, brings about even more challenges. And I think all these and sort of the opinions about, should we go back, should we move forward, is very much with us right now. The issue of performance, whether in the remote working performance can be actually optimized, was a big issue that has been discussed. There's an interesting research that came out that basically says that, of course, for certain people, working remotely has actually increased the productivity, and all of us have found pockets of productivity. But overall, what this graph demonstrates is that when you measure productivity over time from February to July, and this is a global statistic, productivity remained stable. It had a dip and a drop around March, of course, and some fluctuations, in the period of having to sort of move to a remote virtual way of working. But overall, the level of productivity remained stable. But what that actually masks is the fact that the people who are actually more productive are the overachievers. People who are conscientious, who are engaged, actually have a higher productivity rate. And lower performers actually have a lower performance. And somehow overachievers are making up for the reduced productivity and performance of the low performers, which is not sustainable. You cannot have the overachievers compensate in a sustainable way for other people, which means that it's an issue that needs to be addressed. And also, we have realized that in spite of the good benefits that sort of remote working can bring, it also brings very specific, real challenges. Another survey talks about the issue on collaboration and communication, the loneliness and isolation, not being able to unplug, and the blurry between the work and home boundaries, the distractions that we have at home, staying motivated. From a client I've been working with, we did specific surveys, and it was clear that the key concerns of working remotely are the ability for horizontal collaboration, the ability to innovate and do brainstorming, the ability to onboard new members in teams, and generally how to really address people that are hiding behind closed cameras and feeling really left out. So we have issues that we need to manage. FOMO, fear of missing out. People have an extra anxiety about not being around and feeling not fully part of the development. We have new biases that are becoming more, or biases are becoming more real or more relevant right now, like the distance effect bias, which is the bias that we prefer and prioritize what's closer than what is further away and what is physically, and that is also around physical space. So in a hybrid situation, there is an issue of paying more attention to people that are with us physically as opposed to people that are remotely with us. And we had that, of course, before, where we had some people sort of coming in on the phone or on video, and we always felt that the people on the remote medium were more observers than full participants. That cannot be in a truly hybrid environment. So we need to update and upgrade the way we go about integrating, and there's a big inclusiveness issue. Now, there's another interesting survey that has shown that generally companies, and this is 500 companies around a number of sort of culture dimensions, that generally companies have done well in managing the crisis. So employees across all 500 organizations actually give high marks to the companies on communication and the culture dimension, the organization that took place, the crisis management, and the way the crisis was managed with transparency. However, what is worrying is that by comparison to the previous 12 months, employees actually give low marks on a lot of agility indicators during COVID-19. So issues like entrepreneurial approach, issues about the level of bureaucracy, the stability of priorities, the red tape, the speed of responding to changes. So although we have done well in managing the immediate issues, these more transformational aspects are aspects that have not been sufficiently addressed, it appears from this survey. So what we have in front of us is a situation where in PwC, we look at those 3 R's that are necessary as a platform for considering the way we address the current situation. So there's a lot of stuff under repair. We need to repair the damage of COVID. We need to address the issues of the extra debt in organizations. We need to address issues around cost cutting, the issues of the economic recovery. But it will be a great shame if at the end of all this, we just go back to old habits and we go back to the way we used to work. There's a big space for rethink, which is actually taking place at society level as well. But in rethink, we need to consider what are the new ways of working that actually could work for organizations, and how do we bring new models around hybrid working forward in a more effective way? Because at the end of the day, we need to reconfigure the organization with a new operating model that is fit for the future in which the organization will be playing. So part of the rethink is to consider that future and the role of our organization in that future and the best operating model in that future, and then think about how to reconfigure organization for that model that we have in mind. So there are specific pillars of managing a hybrid working future that involves issues of culture, vision, about the processes, the tools, the working mode, and how to transform the workplaces. And in finding how to be effective in a hybrid situation, one of the clear emerging messages is that you cannot just apply a one-size-fits-all. Different people we have seen are affected by different circumstances. We have parents with children that are having their own anxieties. We have people who stay alone, or we have people who want to have that social connection, who need to be in a physical space. So the centralization of decisions, it's great for managing the crisis, but the leadership that is needed going forward is a leadership that has a lot of empathy built into it, where you really connect to every single individual in the organization, and you become much more human-centric about the real needs or emerging needs or evolving needs over time of our people, and adjust to the individual. And at the center of everything, given that we are evolving and we're changing and we are transforming, we need to ensure that we maintain a growth mindset in our people. And especially under stress and under crisis, it's easy for our people to sort of feel more comfortable to go back to the familiar, to what they know, and not experiment enough, not get out of their comfort zones. So a growth mindset is a mindset that actually tries things out, doesn't mind making mistakes. A closed mindset, it's a mindset where you try to protect yourself and you feel envious of other people's successes, whereas a growth mindset is inspired by the people's successes. So in everything we do, we need to cultivate in our culture that growth mindset that will propel our people's ability to experiment and try new things and adapt in the new environment. We've talked about the need to actually unlearn and relearn a lot of things. Nothing of our past and experiences is the only way to manage the current situation. We need to perhaps forget some of the stuff that we held as strong beliefs about what works and doesn't work. We need to rethink and relearn what is appropriate. And at PwC, we talked about the fact that we need new skills in the new world, and the point of upskilling is something that is increasingly more relevant. I would like to make the point, though, that sometimes we think of skills more as digital skills, as the necessary skills that will help people utilize automation tools. Increasingly, we're discovering in this crisis, through this experimentation, that what we really need also is human skills that will build that adaptability, the creativity, and the leadership that we need to move forward. A trend that was here before, it will continue to be beyond the pandemic. Just as a reminder, is of course this landscape of jobs that will continue to be disrupted or displaced by technology. This statistic that came out from the World Economic Forum very recently talks about 97 new jobs that will be created, 97 million new jobs, and whereas 85 million jobs will actually be lost. Some other statistics talk about 30 to 40% of jobs actually being displaced or disrupted by technology. So it's not a case of really going back, it is a case of moving forward. And I mean, learning at the end of the day is the new pension, because with the aging workforce, we see that increasingly more and more people will remain in work or at work beyond the age of 60 and 65. So our organization needs to deal with these changes with speed. I mean, the pandemic is here, the economic crisis is here, some tough decisions are ahead of us. We need to reform, and we need speed, and we actually need scale also. But scale goes through people. So when we talk about scale in our organizations, we really are talking about introducing innovation as a systemic change in organizations. And to innovate at scale systemically, increasingly we talk about citizen-led innovation. And citizen innovation is about our people actually embracing and being part of giving ideas. So a key theme around this is the issue of psychological safety. The safety that people have in expressing views without the fear of being ridiculed or somebody telling them this cannot work, or actually being encouraged to talk and be listened to. And it's interesting that when we talk about psychological safety, we of course need people to be empowered and be accountable, because without that, helping people being empowered and accountable, they will only stay in sort of an apathy state or a no stretch state. But what would actually differentiate people to move to a growth innovation mindset is high psychological safety. If they don't have high psychological safety, they will actually either be very anxious and stressed with closed minds, or totally apathetic. Which then brings the big issue of trust and how our people can trust us in this journey of upskilling and moving forward. And also the pandemic has also taught us that it's no longer a taboo to talk about mental health and to acknowledge the anxieties that people have. Anxieties that today we have with having to deal with keeping your productivity up, working from home, and having small children, for example, at home. It's a big issue. It's an issue that is there and we're not sufficiently addressing. So the overall well-being agenda is center stage with everything that we're going to be dealing with moving forward. But in spite of the anxieties and the stress, the work needs to continue to be a source of joy for all of us. And again, how do you create the conditions for joy? So as a management philosophy, if we look at the evolution of the thinking of leadership within organizations, it's interesting that as the emerging themes of the more contemporary leadership models around servant leadership and collaborative management, and the companies working more as networks have emerged, and how to empower the team through purpose. In the last year, in the pandemic, even more specific areas have emerged on empathy, trust, resilience, and growth, and how citizenship can be brought about within organizations and within societies, of course, and how to address wellness and productivity and the responsibility of people. And there are some very good examples of organizations that are exemplars in this space. So in conclusion of my positioning for today, there are a number of questions that we all have, and we want them addressed through this conference and through the great speakers that we have here. So what is our why? Has our why changed as part of COVID-19? About the purpose of organizations, about our role as leaders. How do we communicate that purpose and meaning in the hybrid environment where we have people not in front of us in a physical dimension? How do we adapt for the hybrid environment, building a culture of agility, innovation, and collaboration, which is clearly key? How are we developing leaders to lead with empathy, inclusiveness, empowerment, and who promote the new ways of working, as opposed to just being stressed to take people in a more physical, familiar space? How do we accelerate digital adoption, not having only the tools, but getting people to really utilize these tools? And finally, how do we upskill for the necessary digital skills and the human skills, I repeat. For those of you who have been in the conference alumni for many years, you know that I always conclude my initial positioning about the issues of the year with a slide about responsibility. This year, we have some great speakers that will actually address a lot of the issues that we have, and that will help us assume that responsibility. We're going to start with Blair Shepard, who is going to give us more the macro view of the big trends, the big factors that are there, in fact, that are there with some urgency to be addressed over the next 10 years, and 10 years is not a big timeline. So, by 2030, great things need to happen, and we can think about organization for the next 5 to 10 years. We have a speaker who will talk about the joy in this situation of work. We have a lot of speeches talking about psychological safety, building trust in these times, how we actually manage the change, how we build culture across remote teams, the new responsibilities that we have with the remote working, how we lead a conscious culture with very specific examples, and how do we enable strategies to move us forward. All the relevant aspects that I've been talking about. So back to the point of personal responsibility, I've been using this slide about, we know a lot of stuff, it's not about knowing stuff, it's about doing stuff. But I was reflecting, this year, do we really know everything that we need to do? Is it just the case of just implementing the stuff we know? I think it's fair to say that nobody really has the answers in this situation. And we need to be serene about that realization and humble about that realization. And I think, the call to action really this year, in my mind, as part of that rethink agenda, is to get ourselves to reflect through 4 lenses, as we see it and listen through all the great speakers that we have, or the great panel that we have, which is going to bring us the Cyprus insight, and what we're doing in a Cyprus context and experimenting for organizations. So we're going to think through, the business, our organization, how will it change? What is the role of a business in the next year? So what is the impact at the business level, at the macro level, at the environment level, at the economy level? But we should also reflect about our team, our specific group of people that we're leading, whatever that group is, and what are the issues, what are the needs, what is the empathy that we can apply, that we can sort of change some of our interventions with the team at the team level, but also consider the individuals within that team, specific people that we should have a one-to-one, maybe a virtual one-to-one, but a one-to-one conversation to address issues. And then again, reflect about ourselves. What does it mean about us? What does it mean about how to deploy our strengths? How to work on sort of the weaknesses that we have? How to not fall into the trap of go to the familiar and the comfortable, but really enable ourselves to experiment and move forward and be appropriate leaders in a hybrid environment.